On the CBS News Money Watch, auto dealers have a math problem. Ballooning prices are keeping potential buyers off lots.
Let us be honest. For most people in the United States, a new car used to be a big purchase, but not a life-ruining decision. Back in the days, we could walk into a showroom, argue a little, sign some papers, and drive home without feeling like they had just taken on a second mortgage. Today, that feeling is mostly gone. The average new vehicle price has drifted into the $50,000 range. Typical payments look more like a second rent check than a car bill. Loans stretch close to a decade. Quality complaints are climbing, and younger buyers are quietly stepping away from the whole game. So what happened? How did a basic tool of everyday life turn into a luxury product that so many people refuse to touch? To answer that, we have to start with the deal that used to exist and how the industry slowly walked away from it. The deal that used to exist. Think back not to some ancient golden age, but to the very recent past. In early 2020, the average new vehicle in America sold for just under $40,000. A union electrician in Ohio, a nurse in Texas, a teacher in Michigan, could reasonably look at a new pickup truck or a small sport utility vehicle and say, yeah, we can make that work. The payments were not fun, but they were manageable. The loan terms were not ridiculous. And, importantly, people expected that if they maintained the vehicle, it would last long enough to justify the cost. There was an unwritten handshake at work. American families provided the money, the loyalty, and in many cases the labor that kept the big automakers alive. In return, those companies built vehicles that regular earners could actually own, not simply admire from the sidewalk. That basic understanding held for decades. Prices moved, sure. Features came and went. But the relationship between a middle-class paycheck and a new car was still within reach. Then, over just a few years, the math slipped out of alignment. Prices did not just rise, they jumped. The handshake did not get torn up in one dramatic moment. It frayed slowly, almost invisibly, until a lot of people looked up and realized they were no longer invited to the new car table. And while it is easy to blame one simple villain, the real story is more layered than that. Some of what happened was understandable. Some of it was not even close why prices really exploded. We should be fair. Not every dollar of price increase came from greed. The pandemic years smashed global supply chains. Semiconductor chips were scarce. Shipping got more expensive. Factories had to pause and restart. At the same time, governments kept tightening safety and emissions rules, which meant more airbags, more sensors, cleaner engines, and now heavy investment in electric drivetrains. On top of that, buyers themselves helped push prices up without always realizing it. Families moved away from compact sedans toward big pickup trucks and sport utility vehicles loaded with screens, cameras, and luxury options. In other words, people were not just buying cars, they were buying rolling living rooms. All of that costs money. But here is the part the industry would rather you not think too hard about. Their own financial reports show that list prices and transaction prices rose faster than their underlying costs. Quarter after quarter, executives on earnings calls bragged about strong pricing and expanded margins. Those are just polite ways of saying, we charged a lot more than we had to, and the market let us. So yes, supply chain shocks and regulations played a role. Yet once the worst of those pressures eased, something important did not reverse. The higher sticker prices largely stayed. The discounts did not magically reappear. This shortage, prices survived long after the shortage itself faded. And when you mix that with how people actually finance cars in the real world, the story gets much darker. If any of this sounds familiar, share your story in the comments. And while you're here, hit subscribe so you are here for the next deep dive. The new car payment trap. Let us talk about the monthly payment, because that is what most buyers really live with. In the last few years, the average new vehicle payment in the United States has drifted into the high $700s per month. For a growing share of buyers, it is over $1,000 every single month. Think about that. 1 out of every 5 or so people driving off a lot commits to what is basically a second rent or mortgage payment, stretched over 6 or 7, sometimes even close to 8 years. Those long loans used to be rare. Ask any older banker and they will tell you, 36 months, 48 months, maybe 60 on the high end. Now 72 and 84-month terms are normal. Why? Because at current prices, shorter loans would make the monthly payment so high that almost nobody could qualify. So the system stretches the loan instead. Here's the catch. When loans get that long, they collide with another problem: depreciation. Vehicles lose value faster than the loan is paid down. A large slice of people who go back to trade in their car or truck discover they still owe thousands more than the thing is worth. Dealers often roll that leftover debt into the next loan. The buyer drives away in a slightly newer vehicle, but also with a bigger principal and a higher chance of falling behind. If anything goes wrong, a layoff, a health issue, a surprise expense, that next repossession is no longer a theoretical risk. It is a tow truck in the driveway at 6 in the morning. And all this might be easier to swallow if the cars being financed to the hilt were bulletproof, impeccably built machines. That is not what is happening either. Paying more, getting less reliable. You would expect that as prices climb into luxury territory, quality would follow. New vehicles should feel rock solid. Right? Instead, many owners report the opposite. Research firms that track problems in 3-year-old vehicles, like J.D. Power, have recorded some of the worst scores in well over a decade. Complaints range from glitchy touchscreens to failing drivetrains and malfunctioning driver assistance systems. At the same time, recall volumes in the United States have been enormous. Tens of millions of vehicles, every single year, are called back to fix defects. There have been high-profile cases where engines in full-size trucks and sport utility vehicles could suddenly lose power, with owners describing hair-raising moments coasting across lanes of highway traffic in brand-new vehicles that simply quit. Now, some nuance is important here. Modern cars are far more complex than the simple sedans of the 1980s. They are packed with computers, sensors, and safety features. With that complexity comes more potential points of failure. Automakers and regulators are also quicker to issue recalls proactively than they used to be. But there is another side to the story. When you see warranty costs exploding into the billions, that is not just bad luck. It is often a sign that parts were cheapened, testing was rushed, or software was pushed out the door before it was ready, all because someone, somewhere, was under pressure to hit a quarterly number. In other words, corners were cut. So you have this strange, infuriating combination: record prices, record payments, and vehicles that many owners feel less confident in over the long haul. And as if that were not insulting enough on its own, there is a new trick that really pushed people over the edge: the subscription car era. A lot of buyers could probably learn to live with higher prices if they felt like they truly owned what they were purchasing. But in the last few years, the industry started quietly changing that, too. Some luxury brands installed hardware features in almost every vehicle, like heated seats or extra performance capacity in electric motors, and then locked those features behind monthly subscription fees. The hardware was physically there. The buyer had already paid for the leather, the wiring, the heating elements, the motor. Yet the company demanded a monthly or yearly payment just to unlock capability that was already built into the car. Other automakers experimented with pay-to-unlock acceleration boosts or gated advanced driver assistance functions. Meanwhile, dealers layered on their own flavor of extraction: high documentation fees, mandatory add-ons like nitrogen-filled tires, paint sealants, and window etching, often slipped into the paperwork at the last minute. Federal regulators have noticed, and some have begun warning or even penalizing dealerships for deceptive or junk fees. But on the ground, the experience for many shoppers feels the same. By the time you get out of the finance office, the number on the contract has mysteriously climbed. Instead of the car being a thing you buy and gradually pay off, it has started to feel more like a platform designed to keep billing you. That shift did not happen by chance. If you follow where the money goes once those payments are made, the pattern becomes a lot clearer. Where all the extra money went. When you look at what the largest automakers have done with their rising profits, a few themes jump out. First, executive compensation. Chief executive officers at major companies like General Motors, Ford Motor Company, and Stellantis routinely take home total pay packages in the tens of millions of dollars per year. In some cases, that is more than 300 times what a median worker at the same company earns. Second, stock buybacks and dividends. Over the past few years, the biggest automakers have authorized tens of billions of dollars to repurchase their own shares and raise cash payouts to investors. They did this while openly celebrating higher vehicle prices and fatter margins. Now, buybacks themselves are not automatically evil. In theory, they are a way for companies to return excess cash to shareholders when there are no better investments available. But ask yourself, in an era of slipping quality scores, shrinking affordability, and aging customers, is there really no better investment than boosting a stock chart for a few quarters? This is where the incentives matter. Most senior executive bonuses are tied heavily to metrics like earnings per share and stock price. Keeping vehicle prices high, trimming costs, and holding down big quality investments makes those numbers look great in the short term. Dropping prices meaningfully or pouring money into robust engineering and simpler, cheaper models for regular earners would hurt those same metrics in the near term. So the system quietly nudges leaders toward one set of choices and away from another. It did not always work this way. The founder, whose name still sits on one of Detroit's most famous companies, had a very different philosophy. Henry Ford's old lesson. In the early 1900s, Henry Ford made a decision that shocked the business world. He more than doubled the daily pay of his factory workers and shortened the workday. Adjusted into today's money, it was like suddenly paying assembly line staff a solid, livable hourly wage, while also giving them more time off. His logic was simple. The people building the cars should be able to afford the cars. If workers became customers, the entire system would feed on itself in a healthy way. Higher wages, lower prices, larger volumes. A prosperous middle class that could support an entire industrial ecosystem. For much of the 20th century, American automakers roughly followed that playbook. There were ups and downs, recessions and crises, but the idea that a regular line worker or office employee could reasonably buy the product they helped create was not controversial. Fast forward to today, and that equation has fractured. Most new vehicles in the United States are now purchased by households with six-figure incomes. Families earning below certain thresholds, especially under $75,000 per year, have largely retreated from new car showrooms. They are buying used, patching up older vehicles, or simply doing without. The original notion that the workers and the customers are basically the same group of people is fading. And when companies forget that basic link, something else eventually breaks: demand. When customers finally push back. For a long time, it looked like automakers could keep ratcheting prices up and people would just grumble and pay. Then some cracks started to show. Take Stellantis, the company behind brands like Jeep, Ram, and Dodge. During the pandemic, it, like many others, raised prices sharply. But when supply conditions eased, it largely kept those emergency price levels in place. The bet was that brand loyalty would carry the day, and American truck and sport utility vehicle buyers would swallow whatever payment it took. They did not. Sales fell hard. Inventories of certain models sat on lots for months. Profits plunged. Dealers grew angry enough to write public letters blasting the company for damaging the brands and driving customers away. Before long, the chief executive officer who had steered that strategy was out. Nissan tells another version of the same story. Years of product decisions, pricing missteps, and a shaky reputation added up to a massive financial hit. The company now faces plant closures and tens of thousands of job cuts worldwide. Workers in communities that never approved the original plans are the ones paying the price. These are not just random business cycles. They are what happens when companies lean too heavily on pricing power and not enough on value. But the most worrying sign for the industry is not one bad quarter or even one bad chief executive officer. It is a long, slow change in who even wants to play this game at all. Young buyers quietly walk away. For older generations in the United States, getting a driver's license and a first car was a rite of passage. At 16 or 17 years old, many teenagers counted the days. Today, the numbers are very different. A much smaller share of 16-year-olds has a license. New vehicle registrations are dominated by people over 55, while buyers under 35 make up less than 1 in 10. There are a lot of reasons for that. Young adults are more likely to live in cities or close-in suburbs where public transit, biking, or ride-hailing are realistic options. Remote work means some do not commute daily. Smartphones and social media make it easier to stay connected without constantly traveling in person. On top of all that, there is the brutal math of modern adulthood: student loans, rising rents, and higher food and healthcare costs all compete for the same limited paycheck. So when a new car now often means committing to a loan payment north of $700 or even $1,000 a month over 6 or 7 years, more and more younger people look at the equation and shrug. They keep driving an older car. They buy cheaper, smaller used vehicles. They share rides with friends. Or they simply do not drive much at all. Automakers like to blame culture, or phones, or cities. Those are pieces of the picture. But if you talk to actual people in their 20s and 30s, you hear a more straightforward story. I am not going to bury myself in debt for a car that might still break and try to charge me a subscription fee for my seat heater. And you can see that attitude reflected out in the driveways across the country. The aging fleet, a silent protest. Take a walk down almost any suburban street in America and look at the license plates and body styles. You will notice something. The vehicles parked there are older than they used to be. The average car or truck on American roads is now well over 12 years old, and that figure has been climbing for multiple years in a row. That means a huge share of households is deciding, consciously or not, that keeping an older machine alive is preferable to taking on the cost of something new. They patch the rust. They live with the squeaks. They replace a transmission instead of trading in. Some of that is sentimentality, sure. People grow attached to a car that has carried them through major life events. But a lot of it is simply math. If you're fully paid off, 10-year-old sedan costs a few $1,000s a year in maintenance and repairs. That may still be far cheaper than a $700 monthly payment plus full coverage insurance, taxes, and all the new fees layered into the buying process. Every time someone makes that calculation and chooses to stay out of the showroom, it is like casting a quiet vote. It says, at these prices and with this experience, I am out. The question is whether the industry is really hearing those votes, or just hoping they will somehow disappear. Will Detroit actually change, or just talk about it? Lately, you can hear a shift in the way executives talk. Almost every major automaker now mentions affordability in their presentations. Some tease future electric vehicles at around $30,000, or small, simpler models aimed at budget-conscious buyers. At the same time, those very same companies continue to approve huge stock buyback programs and pay out rich executive bonuses. Some chief executives have dodged public hearings on vehicle affordability, sending underlings, or simply declining to show up. So how do you tell the difference between real change and clever public relations? You look at the actual numbers on the window stickers and the actual patterns in the balance sheets. Real change would show up as significantly lower average transaction prices, not just temporary rebates on models that were overpriced to begin with. It would show up as higher spending on quality and durability, fewer rushed launches, fewer embarrassing recalls. It would show up as a pullback from paywalled features and junk fees that clearly anger customers. Most importantly, it would show up in who can realistically buy a new car again. If people earning median incomes start coming back to the market in meaningful numbers, that will be the clearest sign that the deal is being rebuilt. Until then, the safest assumption is that the current strategy remains the same. Squeeze as much as possible from a shrinking pool of buyers for as long as they will tolerate it. The good news for consumers is that markets can and do push back. We are already seeing hints of that pushback now. Where this goes next? At this point, the situation is not complicated to describe. Automakers raised prices faster than their own costs. They leaned on longer loans and aggressive financing to make those prices seem manageable. They allowed quality and reliability to slip in too many cases. Then they layered on subscriptions and junk fees and directed a big chunk of the extra cash toward stock incentives and executive pay. And now, a growing number of Americans, especially younger ones, are simply opting out. We do not know exactly how far this will go. Maybe a few companies will pivot hard and try to become the Toyota Corolla of the 2030s. Simple, honest, affordable, durable. Maybe new entrants will step in where the legacy brands refuse to go. Maybe regulators will crack down harder on deceptive pricing and anti-consumer practices. We do not know exactly how far this will go. Maybe a few companies will pivot hard and try to become the Toyota Corolla of the 2030s. Simple, honest, affordable, durable. Maybe new entrants will step in where the legacy brands refuse to go. Maybe regulators will crack down harder on deceptive pricing and anti-consumer practices. Or maybe the big players will keep assuming that enough people will grumble and pay anyway, until the day their own sales charts finally convince them otherwise. What is clear is that every time a family decides to keep an old car another 5 years, or buys used instead of new, they are sending a message. The question is how long it will take the industry to truly listen.